They're great athletes today, but they are hard for kids to identify with because they don't stay put. They are merely hired professionals signing a 3-year contract with a local franchise and then playing out their option and moving on to another team in another city where the grass is greener, or at least the dollars are. Hero worship is an affair of the heart, but today our would-be heroes leave too quickly and too often to be loved. We don't want to be hurt, so we don't grow too attached. When we were growing up, Sandy Koufax was a Dodger, Stan Musial a Cardinal, Mickey Mantle a Yankee. But the day of his superstar coming up through the system and spending his entire career with one city in any professional sport is over. Johnny Bench may be one of the last of them, which is why his leaving is particularly sad. I'm Jerry Springer. The world changed, so we shouldn't be surprised that our colleges did too. We'll talk about it. I am not God, nor am I a theologian. He's not here, of course, to celebrate his 50th birthday. He wouldn't have been if no one had the chance to see that. Our defiance, our youth, our naivety, and our vulnerability. What we remember most about Elvis is not the fact that he died, but we are reminded about the fact of when he was young and when he was young.
Have you heard what Jerry Springer's been saying?
About the home state crisis.
It's enough to make any politician start thinking about life in the private sector.
On Cincinnati's residency law.
It's what an employee does while on the job that counts, not where he happens to bed down with his family at night.
On school prayer.
Well, it just doesn't matter. Those who want to pray will, those who don't, won't.
Jerry Springer's commentary on News 5 at 11. People make the difference.
Is striking baseball's national pastime? Commentary tonight. It's tempting at moments such as this to overstate the case. This is not the greatest thing that ever happened. It will not affect history. There are people who face far more serious struggles every day and must look at this as nothing more than a great athletic achievement. But when I saw macho tough Pete Rose standing there alone in the midst of 5 uninterrupted minutes of adulation suddenly reduced to tears, it came to me. We were bearing witness to a circumstance of which there are no parallels, at least none that I can think of. We were watching an ordinary human being, after a lifetime of uncompromising dedication, finally achieve the ultimate height of his calling. And he did it with all the world watching and all the world there to say, well done. The subways were tough, and the language was tough, and making ends meet was tough. But after Hitler, everything was a piece of cake. And this was America, and their kids would have it all. As you know, we have tens of thousands of abortions each year. Well, imagine, if you will, if tens of thousands of, let's say, 5-year-olds were being executed each year. Certainly no one would be complaining if a pipe bomb were placed outside the building where those executions were taking place. Why, that person would be considered a national hero. The people committing the executions would be charged with murder, and anybody in government or elsewhere suggesting that executing 5-year-olds be legal would be strung up from the highest tree. But of course there is no such public reaction to the notion of abortion, because regardless of your personal view, you must admit most Americans
ready to dissolve
don't
his name out, ready to push it on
one. A fetus is yet a person, or abortion is the same thing as killing a born baby.
Dissolve, push in.
And because most Americans don't believe that, that's why abortion remains legal. And those who would bomb clinics to make their points are viewed as nothing less than criminal extremists. Look, this is not a matter of choosing up sides on our president. We can love him and love everything he's done. But he is 76, holding the world's most stressful job. And he wouldn't be the first 76-year-old to start forgetting things. And he is forgetting things. Indeed, after conflicting testimony as to whether or not he gave permission to sell arms to Iran in exchange for hostages, President Reagan now says he doesn't remember. Well, assuming he's telling the truth, that's no laughing matter. What other major items of foreign policy is he not remembering? And why isn't he writing it down so he won't forget? And what else is his staff keeping from him? By the way, who's running this country anyway?
By 1987, the 43-year-old newsman was regularly being named best TV anchor in Cincinnati.
So, as I thank you tonight for the best anchor honor, as well as for accepting me in this dual role, I also must thank my bosses. First, because they deserve it. Second, because they may be watching. And thirdly,
Jerry enjoyed his local celebrity.
Years, through his second career as a TV anchorman.
8 days ago, the bus drivers went on strike.
Despite no TV experience, Springer's editorials made his station #1.
Well, Major League Baseball, considering the price of tickets these days, has a responsibility to put only professionals on the field who don't disrupt through their incompetence and arrogance our national pastime. Arrogance? You got it. He blows the game, Pete goes out to argue, which is well within his rights, and umpire Pallone jabs him in the face. So Pete, as most humans would, shoves back. Not a response that will win him the Nobel Peace Prize, but at least understandable in light of the poke in the face. The outrage here is, considering the provocation, the length of the suspension. The fact that it was issued without first having a hearing where Pete could be heard. And where, oh, where is the punishment for the umpire? Since when may they hit ball players?
How can you not feel good about it? But when the moment fades and the Discovery 5 are back at home and the news shifts to more earthly endeavors, the voice will inevitably be raised again. What price victory? How much for national pride? And in an age of suffocating deficits and promises of no new taxes, can we really afford the billions and billions to circle the earth we have such trouble living on simply for bragging rights on the Ruskies? No question, beating them in hockey was cheaper.
And we think of Krista McCullough and that terrible moment emblazoned on our minds. And I wonder if they're nervous. Oh, God, let them get up there. And in this world, and particularly in this effort, which is primarily the Super Bowl of technological achievement, the great irony in this wondrous display of computer and machine is that the moment that stops our hearts is not so much the power of the rocket thrust or the miracle of all those scientific formulas, but rather the simple courage of those 5 human beings who strapped themselves into the capsule for life's ultimate Olympic event, where you don't win or lose, you just win or die.
And she wasn't a doctor or a scientist, but for tens of thousands of kids for a half-century now, she was the best of medicine. A toy, a smile. Hey, hang in there, kids. Somebody loves you. Things will work out. Ruth Lyons and a Children's Christmas Fund has become perhaps our community's most lasting and visible testament to the notion that we think about more than ourselves, that we care about others, particularly God's greatest gift, the children. We well know now what she's meant to the kids, but maybe her greatest gift was what she taught us grown-ups, from the homespun simplicity of a noontime television set, that life is best and most meaningful when we take care of each other.
Well, is Giamatti biased or can he be fair? Well, how about a little common sense here? Why doesn't Giamatti simply say, look, I'm as honest and fair as the day is long. I have not already determined that Pete is guilty. But since the most important thing here is finding the truth and preserving the integrity of baseball as well as Pete's rights, I'd like to avoid even the appearance of having been biased. I'd like to lift the cloud that will inevitably hover over this case no matter what decision I now reach. So, I'll step aside here, agree not to hear this case, and we'll have baseball appoint somebody else or an agreed-upon panel to hear the evidence, maybe a former federal judge or even a former president. If Bart Giamatti would just say that, he'd be a national hero overnight. He'd have put the game ahead of his pride. Pete would have no excuse for not going ahead with a hearing. Both sides would be heard. The issue would be out of court. The question of Pete's betting finally settled. And once again, we could play ball. By suggesting that the man who graced the stage at the Coliseum last night was part of the creative genius that made up the greatest musical group of the century, the greatest rock group of all time, the Beatles. Their music changed the industry, changed rock and roll, indeed changed Western culture in terms of style, attitudes, and the politics of youth. And 100 years from now, their music will still be played even by symphony orchestras who are already playing it. There have been better musicians, better singers, better writers. But nobody could do it all with such impact while leaving a mark of such longevity. There'll be no reunion tours, of course. A crazed assassin saw to that. But those of us old enough to remember can never forget that where music has always been the language of the generation, the Beatles were the one group that created and shaped a generation. Those for whom life is no longer a gift but a sentence, imposed not by the courts but by the fates in the guise of failing and often painful health, where recovery is not an option and the substance of life, mental or physical, has irreversibly passed, for them, a way out is a blessing. But if we open up the right to die to those who simply aren't what they used to be, where the substance of life seems lost, then where do you draw the line?
For Jerry Springer's commentary, turn to the team you know, News 5.
This is Cincinnati's year, the city of champions. And sure, the prospect's exciting, but why do so many of us care and get so worked up about it all? I mean, it's just a bunch of rich kids playing a game, and yet you can't help but notice the incredible impact professional sports is having on our town. And it's more than entertainment. It's that in modern America, professional sports is about the only vehicle left to demonstrate a positive sense of community. Oh, certainly if disaster strikes, a tornado hits, or a hurricane ravages a town, everybody pulls together and there's a real feeling of shared concern, a sense of community. But other than disasters, what happens, or what do we do in our daily lives that brings us all together? If Kroger has a record year in profits, do we all rally on Fountain Square? Who dey think's going to beat them cost cutters? This is not about more people dying of cigarette-caused cancer and heart disease than marijuana, so how come the killer is legal and the high isn't? For now, it's a matter of personal freedom, and if you know the risks, if you are indeed warned of them and yet still choose to light up with a morning coffee or whenever you choose to, that's your business. This is America. You're free to live, and with certain restrictions, you are free to die. But we're not free to take others with us. We're not free in the exercise of our own freedoms to infringe upon the rights of others. And so if simply good manners doesn't convince us, perhaps some basic constitutional principles should tell us that we can't puff our poison in other people's lungs. Because what man hasn't looked, and what woman in the privacy before her own mirror hasn't wondered if they're big enough, and is she therefore woman enough? It's as if we guys never grew up from the days when we stuffed Playboy magazines under our mattresses so Mom wouldn't find it back when we were 15, sneaking peeks at curvaceous models, connoting size with sex. Good Lord, if men had to run around in Speedos every day, having women constantly staring to see if we're big enough, its degrading, humiliating, and immature joke continued into adulthood, reminding women that they're basically property, a trophy, buffed and shined, much like a new car. We ought to know better. We ought to respect women more. Forget who's to blame. It's too late for that. The fact is, third and fourth generation poor folk don't believe any of us anymore. Our institutions have helped rip their families apart. There's no base, no education, no economic support. The supremely gifted make it out, but most, of course, don't. And they don't believe politicians give a damn, except to get their vote and agree to keep the peace. Except for Jesse Jackson, that is. He is a bridge across troubled waters. The disenfranchised do listen to him because he really does listen to them, and he hears their cries. And we can slough him off. We can say, oh, that's just Jesse Jackson grandstanding again, and choose to ignore him. But if we do so at our own peril. We ignore a gifted voice and a valuable conduit to a part of America we haven't let in. Simply put, if we don't find room for Jesse Jackson and the forgotten and alienated Americans he represents, if we chase these folks out of the system, what avenue is left for them to vent their anger? If the politicians won't listen, if the courts won't listen, if the media won't listen, if we keep chasing them away, we will eventually chase them onto the streets. So unlike the presidential debates, where how the candidates come off is significant in swaying undecided voters, how Quayle, Gore, and Stockdale did tonight doesn't matter a hoot, other than it gave each of them a chance to blast away the head of the other guy's ticket. So Quayle could go after Clinton's character, Gore could lament the condition Bush has left America in, and Stockdale, well, he could simply echo Perot and say, plague on both your houses. We need a clean sweep in Washington. It's what the world sees first of us, and we are under no obligation, constitutionally or otherwise, to be erecting political statements as utterly vile as the message of the Klan on the doorposts of our town. His perfectly legal betting at a racetrack is not a crime. And what does baseball have to tell him he can't participate in perfectly legitimate activity? Even if it's a disease, since when is a disease grounds for banishment from baseball? I dare say the newspapers, television, and radio stations that have been lighting up on Marge and baseball's sorry record on race are just as white and just as closed off to minorities in their boardrooms. And I know it may not be your kid, and it may not be your kid's friends, but they're in the same class, and bullets don't have names. They're indiscriminate. They hit who's ever in the way. It seems so much safer to be young then, and so much easier, and so much more romantic. And pulling out his old albums in '45 simply reminds us of that wonderful long ago time
when we were young too. And nobody can bring it all back better than Elvis. But they are paid that because owners get rich off of them. But when the wheels aren't that good anymore, when the reflex is slow and the eyes can't pick up the rotation on the ball, suddenly it's, thanks, don't let the door hit you on the way out. There's no afterlife for black ball players. We've had demonstrations and sit-ins and sometimes even riots. But then it's time to vote. And when the ballots are counted, without having to resort to troops or police or threats and intimidation, the results are simply accepted. You see, I selfishly didn't want there to be any place in America where I couldn't go, where I couldn't one day with child or grandchildren return, be it as a mayor, an anchor, or a commentator, whatever it took. I was determined to have you know that I was more than a check and a hooker on a one-night stand. Take care of yourself and each other. Yeah, it's a wonderful thought, all right. Certainly the right and decent way to live.